About 2 o'clock in the morning on January the 10th, 1966, my family was attacked by 2 carloads of armed Klansmen who came there with the intent to kill my dad, destroy the property, really, I believe, to kill us all, was their intent, because they wanted to send a message of fear and intimidation to the Black community about what could happen to you if you decided you just wanted to try and register to vote. Not vote, but just try and register. So 2 o'clock in the morning, they turned their motors off, up the road, coast down the road, coast into the yard with the lights off on their cars. So when the cars came through the gravel and they were getting out of the cars, slamming the doors, that woke my mother up. When it woke her up, she immediately woke my dad up and made this statement, Vernon, I believe they have got us this time.
I've been in here at the Capitol. I've seen demonstrations on a regular basis, and never in my wildest dreams did I believe that someone would be crazy enough to break into the United States Capitol, but they did. We didn't have a knowledge of what was actually going on until one of the security personnel said, the Capitol's been broken into. You know, it still didn't register because in the mind of a member of Congress or the average citizen, you know, the security protocols to get into the Capitol on an ordinary day was about as stringent security protocols as one can imagine. But as that moment started moving in time, my wife called me, wanted to know what was going on. I said, well, there's some kind of demonstration going on in the Capitol. I'm not sure because we can't get out and we can't see out either. About that same time, the Capitol Police came in the gallery and said, put your gas mask on. Now you understand, these are just members of Congress. First thing you say, well, okay, where are they?
There's a long, ugly history of voter intimidation in America. Hundreds have been killed and millions cowed with one goal: to keep the power structure in the hands of the mobs who believe that power should never be shared, even if it means overthrowing a democratically elected government. In 1832, French political writer Alexis de Tocqueville wrote of voter intimidation against African Americans in the Free State of Pennsylvania. Immigrants were also regularly targeted. In Boston, anti-Irish and Catholic sentiments ran rampant. Organizations like the American Protestant Society and the Order of the American Star marched through the streets. Right-wing publications proclaimed, "Americans must rule America." And congressional leaders such as Massachusetts Senator Henry Cabot Lodge called on voters to guard our civilization against an infusion which seems to threaten deterioration. This is a history that has traversed the halls of government, through city streets, and down the back roads of rural America, to places like Mississippi. In 1965, Sam Bowers, the imperial wizard of the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, decided he'd had enough. In a secret Klan meeting, he declared, "Something needs to be done about that Damer nigga down south," and then issued a Code 4, the Damer Project.
Well, it brings back a lot of memories, but it makes a statement about the different Americas that we have. Here I'm looking at 4 of my older brothers who were serving in the U.S. military stationed all over this world, protecting America and America rights and what America is supposed to be all about. But yet at the same time, their family is being terrorized in America by homegrown American terrorists. And now here they are coming home from their duty stations, looking at the ruins of the house that they had lived in, their father had built, and they came to bury their father.
In the 19th century, voting was a very open exercise. It was an environment ripe for intimidation and even shootings. New privacy and poll monitoring laws helped, but during Reconstruction, when African American men could vote and hold office, violence and attempts to reverse the results grew increasingly brazen. Colfax, Louisiana, 1873. The election for governor is split, and President Grant sends troops to support the Republican candidate, and Southern whites rebel. Democrats attempt to seize control of the Grant Parish regional government as an all-black militia takes over the local courthouse. A 300-strong insurgent army opens fire with a cannon as gunfire hails down. Some of the black defenders escape, others surrender, and then the white mob begins massacring their black prisoners. 3 whites and upwards of 150 African Americans were killed. It was the bloodiest single instance of racial carnage in the Reconstruction era. However, it wouldn't be the last. November 10th, 1898, Wilmington, North Carolina, and the only successful coup attempt to ever take place on American soil. 3 of the city's 10 aldermen are black. To end this Negro domination, former Confederate Colonel Alfred Waddell threatens to choke the Cape Fear River with carcasses. On Election Day, red shirts patrol black neighborhoods, but blacks continue to vote and hold office. Waddell, with his mob of over 2,000 men, convenes at the courthouse, where he delivers the White Declaration of Independence. We, the undersigned citizens, do hereby declare that we will no longer be ruled and will never again be ruled by men of African origin. The angry mob rampages through the black neighborhoods with rifles and a Gatling gun. Some 250 African Americans are killed. The aldermen are thrown out, and Waddell is declared the new mayor. Black elected officials are jailed and marched to the train station. Thousands more flee. 2 years later, the North Carolina legislature would enact strict Jim Crow laws.
We saw doors being shut on the floor of the Capitol. We saw furniture being moved toward the various entrances to the Capitol floor. And we saw weapons being drawn by security personnel and said, get on the floor, they're about to break in, and take your pen off. Well, you know, we're talking about a congressional pen, and for somebody like Bennie Thompson, who spent time when the right to vote was very precious, and now to be a member of Congress, and somebody said, well, because the crazies are breaking in, you need to take that pen off. My mind, no, I need to keep this pen on to show the crazies that I'm not afraid of them, but also this is a symbol of democracy. This is a symbol of the greatness of this country, that a person who comes from a community where people who look like him couldn't even vote, and now to be a member of Congress, and now to let some, as I said, some crazies scare me into taking it off. It wasn't about to happen.
In the 1950s and 60s, voter intimidation and violence was particularly pronounced in places like Alabama and Mississippi. Hundreds were attacked and jailed during the Selma to Montgomery March. 2 were killed, Reverend James Reeb and Viola Liuzzo. Exactly 2 weeks after the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, Jonathan Myrick Daniels, a seminary student, was gunned down by a deputy sheriff for trying to help blacks to register to vote. In Mississippi, Reverend George Lee was murdered in 1955 for urging others to vote. 3 months later, Lamar Smith was killed in broad daylight on the courthouse lawn for the same offense. In 1961, Herbert Lee, who helped register black voters, was killed by a state legislator. June 12, 1963, Medgar Evers, the field secretary of the NAACP in Mississippi, was gunned down in his driveway. September 10th, Fannie Lou Hamer was shot at 15 times because she attempted to vote. June 21st, 1964, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Mickey Schwerner were arrested by Neshoba County Deputy Sheriff Cecil Price for speeding. They were released into the hands of the Ku Klux Klan and brutally murdered and buried in an earthen dam. 7 of the 18 defendants were found guilty of violating their civil rights. This included Sam Bowers, who ordered the killings. However, none were found guilty for murder. 41 years later, Edgar Ray Killen, one of the main conspirators, would be convicted of manslaughter. 18 months after the killing of Chaney, Goodman, and Schwerner, Sam Bowers would issue the order to eliminate Vernon Dahmer.
I'm sitting in the barn that we came to after the attack. My dad was sitting approximately in this area on a hay bale, skin hanging off in his arms. He was quiet, composed. He wasn't hysterical. He wasn't crying or doing anything like that. He was just being Vernon Dahmer. And he made the statement that we're gonna have to leave this place because all of our guns are in the house and the house is on fire, and these Klansmen might get their nerve up and come back. And we don't have any way to protect ourselves, so we're gonna have to leave this place. And that was the time that my brother decided, older brother, to go back to the house, get a truck that wasn't burning under the carport, back it out, go get my aunt, bring my aunt here, and my dad, who was burnt, my sister, who was burnt, and my mother, who was not, all went to the hospital. And my older brother, Harold, and I, we stayed here on the place as people from the community started to gather up, and we stood out there in Monroe Road and watched the house and the store burn down.
While the extreme violence associated with voter intimidation seemingly died down after the 1960s, the tactics of intimidation merely shifted. In 1981, the National Ballot Security Task Force was created and deployed by the Republican National Committee. Some 200 off-duty officers and security guards carried visible firearms, walkie-talkies, and armbands. They fanned out to voting polls to harass Black and Latino voters in New Jersey, ask for their registration cards, and then turn them away. Republican candidate Tom Keene would become the next governor of New Jersey, won by 1,800 votes. The Democrats sued, and the Republican Party now had to obtain court approval to conduct any poll watching. That would hold for over 40 years until 2018, when the restrictions were lifted.
Everybody knew who did it, knew it had to be the Klansmen, and so I think that was clear to everybody. Now, what had happened to us on the night of January the 10th, they turned their motors off, coasting to the yard with the lights off on their cars. They immediately started to fire into the house, breaking the windows out of the house. Then they punctured gallons of gasoline that they had brought with them, threw those gallons of gasoline in through the windows, followed by torches. And And the whole time they're doing this, they were engaged in a gun battle with my dad. So my dad is running through the house, through the flames, in his underwear, shooting at the Klansmen out of several different doors and windows in the house, back and forth. Now, there were 2 carloads of Klansmen, at least 8 of them in the yard. One carload had started to attack the store that was ran by my 86-year-old aunt, great aunt, who lived in an apartment attached to the back of it. The store is burning, house is starting to burn, but we're still in the house. And my dad is engaged in this gun battle with these Klansmen. By him running back and forth from different windows and shooting, the Klansmen actually thought it was more than one person shooting back at them. So they got nervous, and one of them turned the lights on in one of the cars. So when they did that, that triggered the other group. So now the Klansmen are shooting at one another in the yard, plus my dad is shooting at them. The Klansmen thought they had actually been ambushed by the FBI. I wake up in the back of the house because the room is full of smoke. So when I open the door to go up the hallway, the flames leap in through the door. So I slam the door shut, then I go out a back window on the room, come around behind the house. About that time, my mother is getting up off the ground where she had fell through the window trying to knock it out. My dad is handing my sister out, and I head on around the house, and I can look up the road about 100 yards, 200 yards away, and I can see these 2 sets of headlights slowly creeping up the road. And one of the cars had the tire shot out on it, and that rim was running in the asphalt, so it was making that eerie crying type noise of metal against asphalt as they eased on up the road. And I still, by then, I hadn't put it all together. But my dad got out and he said, hey, we've been attacked by the Klans. Oh, so I immediately thought about Aunt Rainey in the store. So I run to the apartment behind the store, and I can't get within 100 feet of that place. The heat is so intense. I couldn't get to the door. So I'm screaming and hollering for her, and then I hear a call from out of the woods about 200 yards away. She had walked out the back of her apartment off into the woods, and she was standing over there. So when I saw that she was okay, I went back to the family, and that's when we left the house, and we went to that barn behind the house. And that was the beginning of my life changing. As I stood there in that road, in my underwear in January, the heat from the flames keeping us warm. Can't get any closer than the road to the house. And we watched it burn down. They just wanted Vernon Damon. They could have come there and knocked on the door, and he would have came out that house to protect his family. Now, he wouldn't have came out there empty-handed, and he probably would have had us right behind him, them 2 boys, for sure, okay? But when you surprise attack like that, you do the best you can. And he did a pretty good job of holding 8 of them off. One guy held off 8. One man.
Let me tell you, the almost 2 years of my life that I spent looking at January 6th, it was clear to me, first of all, that Donald Trump was the puppet master or the orchestrator of what occurred. He used a lot of people as pawns to accomplish what occurred on January 6th. If you remember that tweet that he gave in November, inviting people to come to Washington on January 6th, that it would be wild, the average person didn't know what January 6th was about or anything, but he built the drumbeat after that tweet, inviting people, organized. They took out permits for people to demonstrate on the Capitol, but it wasn't in his name, it was always in some other organization, but he knew about it. And so our work on the committee, we found significant individuals who came to this town to do more than just peacefully protest.
As this enormous crowd shows, we have truth and justice on our side. We have a deep and enduring love for America in our hearts. We love our country. We have overwhelming pride in this great country. We have it deep in our souls. Together we are determined to defend and preserve government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
On January 6, 2021, approximately 140 police officers and Capitol Police were assaulted in the defense of the U.S. Capitol building as the coup attempt to stop the certification of the next President of the United States unfolded. 5 officers died as a result of the attacks as they defended the Constitution and the integrity of the vote. A vote that the Trump administration's own Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency stated was the most secure in American history.
And again, I tell you, before that day, I would never have imagined that what occurred on that day would have happened. Not in my wildest dreams, but it did.
The last time you saw your dad was?
The last time was later that day, January the 10th. I don't remember the exact time, but it was that afternoon. My brother and Harold and I, we were still out here on the farm. You know, probably hanging out over there around that barn. And law enforcement people, whatever, doing whatever they do. And we get notification that my dad is not doing well at the hospital, and for us to get there as fast as we can. So we jump in the vehicle and we get to the hospital. And so we get up on the floor where he's at, and my mother is in there, sitting in a chair next to the bed, and he's having a difficult time breathing. I don't go in the room because the room is full. So I'm standing in the hallway, diagonal across. I can see him laying in the bed from standing in the hallway. And all of a sudden, he rises up in the bed. He sits up and he calls my mother's name, Jewel. Then he falls back and he dies. Just like that. So, yeah, within 12 hours, he finally succumbed to the burns. You know, he died from asphyxiation. His lungs were severely burnt, they couldn't exchange the oxygen from the air. So he literally suffocated to death from the burns. So that's my last memory of him.
"32 years after Vernon Dahmer was killed, Sam Bowers, the Klan leader who ordered the attack, would finally be convicted of murder on August 21, 1998. While on his deathbed, a local reporter asked Vernon Dahmer if voting was important enough to die for. He replied, "If you don't vote, you don't count." More than 1,000 people marched through the rain and mud to attend Vernon Dahmer's funeral. A few weeks later, his voter registration card arrived in the mail. He died, never getting the chance to vote.